See, that's never a good idea for your hypnotist to count backwards to you
Oh,
when you're
shit.
going to go live.
My
I
bad.
mean, I would think the professional hypnotist would have caught on to that right away, but I guess
What
not.
Renee's talking about. Renee is one of the most prolific hypnotic volunteer I've ever worked with ever. And to start the podcast, I was counting down from 3 backwards. And so there was a
Much
very
like
good
you
chance that we
do,
would start the podcast with her looking like this.
and it happens very quickly. If somebody's never been hypnotized, it's a great experience. It really is. Um, I go to sleep like that every night, but I've been doing it every night for we figure about 4 months now.
Yeah.
4 months.
By the way, for anybody watching, I know I've got shadowing on my face here. It's because I have shitty lighting in my house. So.
And I have shadowing. I don't know. And I don't care. Do you see how I cleaned that up?
You did. Very, very impressive.
I don't care. But anyway, this counting backwards thing that you do is real handy at night because I usually don't make it past 2. So when you started counting backwards, I immediately have to kind of stiffen up because I'm like, no. I've gotten used to hearing that. But if somebody ever gets to come out to see one of your shows, and we hope they do, I'm really hoping they will jump on stage to become a volunteer because I think it would be a lot of fun.
Honestly, the way I try to do the show is where it's at least as much fun for the volunteers as the audience, and preferably, hopefully, even more fun for the volunteers than the audience. So that when people leave the stage at the end of the night, they don't feel like they made a bad choice. I want them to leave the stage going, "Oh my God, that was amazing. That was fun. I'm glad I did it."
What you do different from anybody else that I've seen is you allow the people to remember everything that they did and what happened. I had worked with one other hypnotist before you, and I didn't like him. He was he was mean to people. First of all, don't ever jerk somebody's neck down. And that's what he did to me. And he kept trying to tell me I was hypnotized. And I kept saying, no, I wasn't. And he goes, before this week is over, I'm going to hypnotize you so you will stop smoking. And I thought, well, that's going to be a trick because I don't want to stop smoking.
Right.
But he kept trying that. And the one thing I noticed right away with you, you're very gentle with the volunteers. You allow them to remember everything and you don't make them make asses out of themselves.
No, the show is supposed to be the way I like my show to be done is where it's creative. The volunteers get to use their imaginations, interact with each other in a fun way. And you're right. At the end of the show, for them to remember, I don't get why it's fair for someone to be on stage with a hypnotist for like an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever it is, to entertain an entire audience and leave the night at the end of the show with no memory. And then the only way to remember the show is to have to buy the video after the fact.
Yeah, or have your crappy friends tell you what you did. And
right.
Yeah, I don't have that good of friends that I would trust to fill me in.
Hey, we don't have a sponsor, do we?
No.
But if we did, Icy Hot. When you have aches and pains, you can count on Icy Hot to go ahead and alleviate that discomfort. However, not to be used in nooks and crannies. Icy Hot.
Hi, quick mutter. Oh, you have no idea how funny that was. And you sit there with a straight face and you're killing me.
Not to be used in nooks and crannies.
That would be
Icy hot.
correct.
Icy hot. Alleviates discomfort when used in appropriate areas, used in an appropriate way.
The show's all yours now because you've already sent me off the rails. If anybody knew some of the inside secrets that we have, they would be shocked and appalled, especially me, because people know that I'm like a delicate, sweet flower.
Indeed, you are. In your own special way.
Now, that was said kind of snotty. That was a little.
But
Yep.
from the heart.
But from the heart. Oh, Jeremiah, I should have known it was you. Tell him what a sweet, delicate flower I am, and he has to treat me very gently.
So the icy hot story, and I'm not going to go into detail real quick.
No, don't.
I was tricked. I was tricked into applying icy hot.
No. Flip,
To
there's no
myself.
way. Wait,
No, well, to myself in an area that's probably not the most appropriate place for icy hot. And it turns out it was really uncomfortable.
And what was the first thing that I told you? Dish detergent.
Well, as opposed,
That hot better not be at me being a sweet, delicate flower, because I'm trying to convince him. Been there, done that. Oh my God, Jeremiah's one of you.
Yeah. So, hey, quick tip, kids. When you have icy hot in an area where it shouldn't be, warm water is not the solution.
Dish detergent.
Yeah.
Maybe.
But warm water, that will exacerbate whatever discomfort you're experiencing. Icy hot.
And quick cleanup with a Bounty towel.
So, okay. Because
now that we're totally off the rails, you bring it back on.
Since we have both spent a good part of our adult lives being comics, tell me about your early days.
Early days in comedy?
Whether it was working in the office and or getting on stage or a combination.
Never thought I'd get on stage, had no desire to do it. Somebody talked me into it, and I went, okay. Got on stage, had a really good first set. 4 minutes. Thought that meant that I was good at it, and decided I would go up the next week. And the next week I went up and was still pretty good. Wasn't until the third week that I really sucked. And then I thought maybe I had a little bit more to learn. See, I thought I knew everything up to that point. But 8 weeks into stand-up comedy, open mic nights, I quit my day job. Because I worked for the best booker in the country, and everybody who had been through had said, if Tom Sobel tells you you're funny, you have a career. So he told me I was funny. So I went into his office and told him I was a professional comedian. And he goes, what does that mean? And I go, that means I quit my day job. And he goes, but you have 3 kids. And I said, but you told me I was funny. And he goes, well, now I guess you're working in my office too. And on weekends, you're going to be on the road and seeing. And that's how I got started. I didn't think about it. I didn't know anything about it. I just, pretty much like everything else in my life, I closed my eyes, put my head down, and went storming right through.
So you did a couple open mic nights, which for anybody who might be watching. When a comic starts out, not all, but usually what they do is they go to any bar or restaurant or club that has like an amateur night. And what that means is the comic gets to get, usually in most cases, like 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 7 minutes, so like a short amount of time. They're not paid. There can be anywhere from like 2 people in the audience to 200. Half the time, the audience is made up of the comedian's friends who put their names on the list. And you just get up and you throw mud against the wall and you see what sticks.
You know, the funny thing was when I started, and I started after you, even though I will confess to being a few years older than you. Um, we were in the heyday of comedy. The comedy club was sold out on open mic night, and we had 25 to 30 open micers going up to do time. And it was a lot of fun. Uh-oh. Apparently, Jeremiah, I might have taken advantage of him on his 21st birthday. And he's loved me ever since. So what can I? So what you're telling us, Jeremiah, is you're into a little bit of S&M, is what you're saying.
Who isn't?
Well, as long as I get to be on the S side, I'm all
Right.
right with that. You know, pretty much I made a 30-year career out of being on the S side of S&M.
Right. So you're getting up, you're doing what, 5-7 minutes at a time? Something like that?
When I first started, yeah, 5 minutes was the max. You know, at 5 minutes, 2 seconds, one of the other open micers was killing you. What about you?
I went to University of Arizona in Tucson, and they had one of the student activity groups is called the Comedy Club, but they were really catchy because it was comedy with a K, club with a K. Thankfully, there was only 2 words. So I started there. I'm not making it up, at least. And then from there, I went to, I did the Comedy Store in La Jolla. I did a couple open mic nights there, and that went well. Then I moved up to go to ASU in Tempe, Arizona. They had a club there called Chuckles, which I'd mentioned, I think, maybe at our first podcast. And I just, Phoenix in the day, because I grew up, born and raised in Phoenix, had a lot of comedy for like, now it's a really pretty big city, but back in the day, it was not a real big city. Like we felt like we were about, in my opinion, like 10 years behind Los Angeles at any given point. But we had a lot of comedy, and there was open mic nights all over the valley. And so you could get up on stage every night of the week, at least once, and in some cases twice a week, twice a night over the course of the week. And I would.
See, we could do that. We could do that around Louisville, except you were driving an hour and a half to 2 hours because we had Lexington, Indianapolis, Cincinnati, 2 clubs in Cincinnati, Dayton, and we kind of did the same thing. We'd carpool and all go around.
This and like in and around Phoenix, there was the NFL Club, which was sort of North Phoenix, and they did Fridays and Saturdays. Anderson's Fifth Estate. The Playboy Club, I think, did comedy for a while.
I'm sure you never went there.
There was a strip club called Fantasy Island. And they had 2 rooms, one where men was stripping for women and one where women was stripping for men. And they started doing comedy in there where men were stripping for women on Sunday nights. So, you know, I was doing comedy every night. And then Chuckles had open mic night on Monday. So you could get around and be up on stage.
Oh, see, I had to wait a long time. I had to be a professional before I got into the strip club. thing. I worked baby dolls. Guy named Steve Eric, rock and roll comic out of St. Petersburg. Good friend of mine. He and I were on a run for either Comedy Zone or Coconuts or one of them up in Myrtle Beach. I said to him, I got to get off. We got to get off right on time because I got another show to do down the road. I'm working at Baby Dolls. And he goes, what? Because he's a strip club connoisseur. And I said,
Wow.
I booked at Baby Dolls for 3 shows later on. And he goes, can I come with you? Yeah, of course you can come with me. And I go, if you want to, but I'm going to be there for a couple hours. And he goes, that's okay. So,
But baby dolls were women stripping for men.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't get involved with the men stripping for women until I worked with the Suncoast Calendar Men and the Chippendales. And
Well, at Fantasy Island, it was an open mic night, so nobody got paid, and it was abusive as hell. There were drunk women who didn't know, especially the first night, didn't know, didn't expect, didn't want comics. So they were pretty abusive.
I bet they were
Yeah,
because now you're into their time.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it was weird because they made like no announcement, none. So they
Well,
go,
of course not, because that would make sense.
right? They go, here's Bob the construction worker, and the guy comes out with like a hard hat and a sledgehammer, right? It's George the policeman, and he comes out with like the hat and the badge. Flip the comic, and I come up like, hey, ladies. And you could tell they were A, drunk, B, confused, and then they just started screaming to take it off. And so like there was no material to be done. It was all crowd work. And the more they were abusive to me, the more I was abusive back to them. And then
Well, I've heard about some of that. Shoot, that can happen at the grocery store.
as it turns out. So like Sunday night, and that's the other thing. Comics were really fun. After doing open mic nights, we'd usually go out, not all the time, but enough, and sit and have late breakfast, like 1 o'clock in the morning, and talk material and clubs and whatever. But like come Monday morning, it's like I'm never doing Fantasy Island again, right? Wednesday, I'm never going back there again. Saturday, I swear to you, I'm not doing it. Sunday, a comic calls me up. He's, are you on? I'm like, yeah, but I'm not doing any time. And I would go up there and they go, ladies and gentlemen, Flip Orley. And I'm like, and I'd get up every week. I lived in denial for like 6 days, 20 hours out of the week. And then I'd go up and do it again.
Well, you have to. To this day, when I look back on my career, I go, I don't know why I did most of what I did. These stupid, well, these, and by the way, if you're reading the comments, I don't do half the stuff they said I did.
Wait, Jeremiah, 1 a.m. is late breakfast. If breakfast starts around like 7 or 8 a.m., by 1 a.m., it's kind of late. Late breakfast.
See, Jeremiah, you could hang with the comics. You could come out with us. That's what we do. We usually, there have been many times that we have been there when the bar closed and then left to go eat breakfast at a Waffle House near you because.
Just because
it's Waffle House. But, these bookers will ask you to do stuff and favors for them and go hundreds of miles, thousands of miles away, not get paid a decent amount of money. And we go because something makes you get on that stage. And I don't know what it is.
Right.
But, and I never thought I would lose it. I'm actually surprised that I haven't wanted to get on stage since I retired, and I have not.
I look back over some of the moments, Um, I think it was Chuckles got a request to put up comics. Chuckles got a request to put up comics on an October fest at an outdoor stage, and so I went down to the Oktoberfest outdoor stage, and I'm doing whatever stupid set I'm doing, and I started getting heckled by like 6-year-olds. They were just standing at the stage, just yelling things at me, and I'm looking at them, like in my mind, it's like I really have very, very good comeback lines, but they're
But
6.
there's
And then I
six.
looked up and I saw that their parents looked like they were bikers, and then
Oh,
I thought, looks like I'm eating shit for the amount of time I'm up on stage. Because, like, first of all, I don't want to look like I'm abusing children because I, I, I don't want to sound like egotistical, but I think I was sharper than them in that moment at that time. But their parents did not look like they had senses of humor, and I actually feared for my safety.
I
So,
well, see, I had a biker following in Fort Myers, a very large biker following.
oh, I wouldn't call mine a following.
Well, I had a following. Um, if I was in Fort Myers, they were in Fort Myers. And I remember one time they brought a guy to meet me. And I always have a habit of taking my shoes off. And he picked up one of my high heels and filled it with beer and drank his beer out of my high heel, which seemed gallant at the time. And then he proceeded to tell me that he had just gotten out of Attica
Wow.
and had come all the way down because they had told him about me. And I'm like, well, let me thank my friends because I have never met anybody straight out of Attica before.
Wow.
They were they were a lot of fun. I could count on them, and trust me, nobody heckled me during those shows.
Oh, I'll bet. I'll
Yeah,
bet.
it was interesting. Early brunch. Look, Jeremiah, the next time we come over to Lakeland, and we hope we're coming over there maybe in November for a fundraising event that we're not allowed to talk about. Um, but we're going to do one for Bill. Oh yeah, I have some pretty good stories, not as interesting as some of Flip's, but
I don't know if that's true.
well, let's pretend like I don't have as good.
So you start getting on the road because you're a mother of 3. So you start getting on the road,
Right,
driving or flying.
driving mostly until I started going to the islands. Um, Probably about 4 years in, I started spending a lot of time in the Caribbean. So then it was all flying, and that's when I moved from Kentucky down to Florida, so I could be closer to the gigs that I really liked going to, which were Cancun, St. Thomas, uh, the Virgin Islands, Grand Cayman. Oh, I liked working those gigs. I'm a beach baby, so I like that. It's a lot of fun, different audiences, international audiences.
When you were driving, were you going out as an MC, opener, featured act,
Yes,
all 3?
yeah.
Just
I
one.
mean, at one point, I was still emceeing and still closing some rooms. One week, I might go out for the weekend to MC, but the weekdays I'd be closing. It's just wherever they would stick me. That's what I did. You know, Show up, call me the janitor, just pay me the money that you told me you were going to pay me.
Right.
And I was
Jeremiah, I want to meet you too. Just when we're down there.
I don't think that's a good idea. I think you two could get into trouble.
Oh, well, I don't know if anybody could see this. Jeremiah's a hypnotist skeptic. All right, good for me.
Well, I tell you what, Jeremiah, I'm a believer.
So, in the days, like you worked primarily or exclusively for Tom Sobel?
No, primarily. But you become like, I think you're a bad hooker when you're a comedian because you've got the guy that you work for, your first pimp, but then when he thinks you're good enough, he sends you out to the other pimps like Brad Greenberg and those guys with the comedy side.
Right.
And so he would refer you to them, and then you would work for them too, and then learn how to operate your calendar and stuff. It was all a big learning curve for me because I didn't know anything about what I was doing. I just kept getting up and telling jokes. See, you were working with the plan. You did a lot better, I think, than I did.
It's funny. Like I said, I would go out to this club and then back to Phoenix, and then out to that club and back to Phoenix, and eventually, I booked myself on a nationwide tour. I'm not sure how I did it, and no, like A clubs. They were all either B clubs or one nighters or strings of one nighters. And so I drove, having never done any of this. I drove from Phoenix to Florida on I-10, and I started doing a string of one-nighters. Early on in that run, um, someone broke in my hotel room and stole all my money and a bunch of other stuff. So I scar easily. From that moment on, I never let anybody in my room ever, not housekeeping, not anyone, because that one early on, like I was broke, and from that point on, like every one nighter I would do for the first like 5, 6, 7 nights, I had to get draws, or just as much money as I could,
Right.
just kind of to pay gas and get to the next hotel. But I worked my way up around Florida and then through the Carolinas and Virginia, all the way up to New York, across through Ohio, Michigan. Like I was gone. My first real tour, I was gone for 6 months.
See, I could never do that because I had 3 little kids at home.
Yeah.
So I didn't like being gone Wednesday till Sunday, but I had to be because that's how long the weeks were. But
Right.
I always went back. It wasn't until my kids grew up where I could actually go out on the road for 6, 8, 10 weeks at a time. And then I started making that Kenran run through Texas, Oklahoma, Colorado, New Mexico. That was a fun run, and I used to be out there for the first snow every year, and that was a lot of fun.
So that like comics used to get to know different runs by the name of the booker. Um, and so, for instance, Sobel rooms were sort of the southeast, I think, kind of, right?
Yeah, Southeast, Gisser and Yoder, Keith Gisser and John Yoder had more the Michigan area.
Right. Yeah, that was like northern, eastern Midwest. David Tribble was the Northwest. Ken Ran was mid
Middle
South.
of nowhere land.
Yeah.
Yeah, just crazy wild area. And Brad Greenberg, Southeast.
So I didn't really work much for Brad Greenberg. You did. I worked some for Sobel. You worked a lot for Sobel. I worked some for Ken Ran, but I think you worked more for Ken Ran.
I worked a lot for him. Yeah.
My big room for Ken Ran was a place in Bossier City, Louisiana, which is just outside of Shreveport, called Jody's Comedy Club.
I remember Jody's Comedy Club.
Jody's?
Yeah, I remember Jody's. I worked a big one for him that was in San Angelo, Texas at that Holiday Inn. And the reason I remember that room was because it was the first time I'd ever performed in a room where everybody was wearing cowboy hats. everybody, and nobody took them off during the show. So you're just looking. All you can see is a sea of cowboy hats, and there must have been 300 people in that club on a Wednesday night. Also, the first time we went there, there was a mistake in the booking, and they had double booked it. So we got very lucky and didn't have to work that night. We drove from Orlando to San Angelo, Texas.
Oh, wow.
Like that trip you had made the week before, like at 1,800 maybe mile
Yeah.
trip.
Crazy amount of driving.
Crazy amount of driving. You get in there and you go to check into the hotel and they go, the comedians have already checked in, and you just go, what? No, 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 no. But see, this is stuff that comics deal with all the time. That's why it's funny, because I think Joe Q audience sits down and they think we've flown in. We've been limoed to the club, you know. We've been served the fruit platter. And in reality, what happens is a lot of times you walk into the comedy club and people are nice enough, but they see comics every week. They're like, yeah, you're the comics. We get it. Sit over at that table. We'll get to you when we can. You know, we'll let you know when it's your turn to go up. Okay. And that's it. It's nothing what my friends and family always thought it would be.
Oh, of course not.
But then occasionally you would get a wild gig. Did you ever work? What was the guy who did Family Feud that also had the comedy club in Cincinnati?
Ray Combs. He had Catacombs.
Ray Combs, yeah. I worked his room the first time as a feature, and then I got brought back as a headliner. And when I was there, we did get a limo. They gave me, as the headliner, I had the use of a limo the entire week I was there.
Wow.
Because the Cincinnati Reds had games, and they were right downtown. So the club wanted to make sure we got there. So I had a limo the whole week. And it was just wild, because the limo driver would go, where would you like to go? And I'd go, to my room. I'm going to the pool. And he'd go, don't you want to go anywhere in Cincinnati? No, no, I'm fine. And he'd go, I'll take you anywhere you want to go.
Wow. I don't think I ever had that experience, truthfully.
Yeah, and a couple of guys owned limos down in Fort Myers too. And after the show, we would all go out riding around and, you know, enjoying Fort Myers.
So I was doing shows in Michigan, and they could have been John Yoder gigs, but they might not have been. I don't remember. But Michigan was the only state that I remember that had comedy clubs in bowling alleys, and more than one. And
they still, you're not going to want to hear this from your manager, but they still do, because one of them has actually called and asked about you.
Really?
Yeah, I believe it was either last week or the week before. Wanted to know if you would be interested.
Well, here's why I wouldn't be, to be honest with you. So I drove up, and I thought there was going to be a comedy club like in the same parking lot as the bowling alley.
No.
I didn't realize the comedy club was in the bowling alley. And then when I got there, what I also didn't realize is nobody in the comedy club was there for comedy. They were waiting for a lane. They were killing time. So, I mean, it's not like, oh, we're there to see the hypnotist, or like, it's going to be another 20 minutes for lane 27. And they would just sit there and wait for the lane. And so people were constantly getting up and leaving. So they weren't attentive. I mean, they were nice enough, but they weren't attentive, and they weren't there for the most part for the comedy. And it was not an easy room.
Well, as your manager, I said no, because we're moving into theaters.
I love bowling. I'm not even kidding. Like, I'm not good at it. I suck at it. I'm horrible at it, but I love bowling. Not to denigrate bowling, I love bowling. I kind of feel like at this point in my life, in my career, working a bowling alley would be taking a step in the wrong direction.
Well, I kind of felt the same way. But if you want to go, I used to be a really good bowler. I bowled in a league when I was a kid and stuff. I loved to bowl. I
I'm not.
would I wouldn't mind taking you on. What did you say?
No, I am not a good bowler.
Well, I nothing would surprise me. But we can go. I will be happy to go bowl a few games with you while we're on the road, but we're not working one. No, it's got to be a theater because that's what I'm working toward. I hope to not. I hope to not see you in any comedy clubs in the next year, unless you particularly want to go there. Is that at me or at them?
No, you said theater. All theaters next year. Crossing my fingers.
Oh, okay.
What?
It was you. I thought it was something.
No, cross my. I wouldn't flash on a gang sign. It's like, ooh, cross my fingers.
I thought you were flipping me or clubs off. I just wasn't sure which.
No, no. All theaters next year would be amazing.
Oh yeah, I think so. I think so. And what's funny is I think I think it's really possible. If I didn't, I wouldn't be making us crazy doing it because I think that's where your show belongs. I think you're so much better than any of the other guys I've seen on TV, or I say on TV, but on YouTube.
Right.
You know, I watch some of these guys. I can't. I just can't watch it.
I'm supposed to take the high road, so I'll just.
Yeah, let me denigrate everybody else because that's my job. Skydive. There you go.
Anyway, so let's
Yeah,
see.
we're excited about it, and I hope I'm really hoping to get a hold of the people in my hometown. I don't know why there's so hard to get anybody to answer a phone there, except, well, it's where I grew up. That should tell you everything you need to know right there. But I'm excited about the ones we got. We're going to where? The
Holland, Michigan, to the Park Theater
that's
on
that's right.
the 19th of September.
That's correct. Which is
Arr. It's Pirate Day, matey.
it's Pirates Day.
And your son's birthday.
My baby. That's
Yeah.
my baby. Is going to be older than I tell people that I am. So that's interesting.
Then we're going to be at the Apollo Civic Theater.
Apollo Civic Theater in New
in
Martinsville.
Martinsville, West Virginia.
Right. And then if everything shakes out like it's supposed to, we've got a gig in Pennsylvania, to Knoxville, to the Georgia-South Carolina border. But until they're they're signed on paper, I'm not willing to disclose any names because that will get one of us in trouble, and I'm not sure which one, but I'm pretty sure it's probably me.
Yeah, and we don't want to jinx it anyway, but so we'll see what happens. So, do you care to tell the story about how you went from like featuring to headlining, or not really?
I'll be happy to tell the story. Two instances where I was booked as the feature and wound up as the headliner. The first one was in Jacksonville, Florida, at the Comedy Zone, at the Jacksonville room. And I had gone down to visit an old friend of mine, Vic Henley, who was supposed to be headlining. I was actually headed to Knoxville, but I went down a night early just to watch his show, and then I was going to spend the night driving to Knoxville. Well, I'm sitting there having dinner with the people from the club, and Vic calls because he's laid over in Atlanta, and now he's not going to make it to close the show. And if you ever heard or talked to Vic Henley or seen any of his shows, he's a real Southern guy, and he goes, "Well, hell, Renee's sitting right there. She can close. Just let her close. Just let her close." Well, they have to call Brad Greenberg, who owns the Comedy Zones, and he goes, "Well, have you ever closed a room before?" "Yeah, I've closed some clubs, but nothing as big as that room," whatever. Anyway, he finally let me close, and I wound up closing that room, and I still wound up featuring for them for a while. But then the other one happened to be in Mobile, Alabama, and that was a room for Chris DePetta. And I always loved Chris DePetta. I think Chris is one of the nicest guys I've ever met in my entire life, and he was a booker too. So Chris had booked me in there as a feature, and they had a guy headlining who owns a comedy club in Florida. I won't say his name, but he owns a comedy club in Sarasota, Florida, and he was the headliner. And what had happened was the first night we went up, and after the show, we came out and sat at the little garden area outside, and the club owner came up and he goes, "She's funny, you're not," to the guy, and goes, "I'm going to flip you." And he goes, "I'll call Chris and work it out." Well, I immediately said, "Well, wait a second. You know, he had a long drive in, blah, blah, blah. Maybe I worked too dirty. I'll be cleaner tomorrow night, da, 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 da." You know, because you never know what a guy's gone through. And it's not fair to flip him like that. But I went back to my room, and Chris called, and he said, "Nope, he's decided to flip you, and you guys are going to flip." Now, prior to this guy had been talking to me, and we'd been real friendly, and he said, "I got to get you down to my club. My wife books it. I'm going to call her. Make sure you call on Monday, blah, blah, blah." Well, needless to say, that was well over 30 years ago. And much like you, he hasn't called me either. He's never talked to me since that day.
Wow.
And that wasn't my fault.
In your
And
defense,
in my defense, um, you know, and I closed the club all the rest of the week. I did a fine job, and Chris DePetta never turned around. He never booked me again as a feature act. He always booked me
wow, good for him.
Yeah, that Chris DePetta, the booker I'd most like to sleep with.
Me too.
I know.
So I in Phoenix, I was still going around for years doing a stand up. You know, 3 minutes, 5 minutes. Sometimes I was working to 15-minute sets. Open mic nights went into like emceeing and open, like being an opener. And then I started doing the hypnosis. And by the time I decided I was going to go on the road, I sort of was forced into going out as a headliner from day one. And I'm not going to tell you I was prepared for it. I'm not going to say that I was good enough to do it. I just didn't have a choice. For no other reason, my show was too long. I couldn't do like a 20 or 30-minute set. So,
Well, I definitely think your show is a one-person show. That's the only way you could do it.
well, that's the way it's worked its way into a one-person show. You know, when I first went out as a headliner, they would usually book. Very rarely did they do an open act and a feature act and then me. But there was usually at least an opener and then me. And it almost never worked out. They always hired people that were really new and not very funny and not polished. And it got to the point where it was harder having someone going up in front of me than just going up and opening the show myself.
Right. I remember when I worked with you, and I thought you didn't need all of the other people. because they try to keep you tight on time and everything, and then they pile 40 minutes worth of comedy in front of you.
Yeah, it made it really hard.
Yeah, it does make it hard. Let me ask you something, because you know that I get a lot of calls through the day and stuff. You know, because we can pretend like we don't talk 800 times a day, but we do. And I tell you what some of these yahoos say to me. What's the best advice you could give a comic that's going to call a booker, any booker, whether it's me or somebody else? What advice would you give them?
At what level?
First time they're calling them. Because you know, today I've taken 2 or 3 phone calls from fairly new comics, and it's funny, they either want to open for you, which isn't going to happen, or they want me to manage them, which there's nothing to manage yet. They have nothing to manage. But what is your advice to them when they call an agent about what they're offering up the agent?
Well, my advice is, before you call an agent or a manager, you need, I mean, in my opinion, comedy schools are great and telling jokes to your friends are fine. Nothing takes the place of stage time. And it doesn't usually, for most people, happen fast. You have to, get up night after night after night, and whether it's 3 minutes or 7 minutes or 12 minutes or 15 minutes, whatever it is, whether there's 10 people in the audience or 1,000 people in the audience, whether it's midnight, whether it's 7 a.m., 7 p.m., nothing matches being on stage. And so, like, show after show after show after show, and don't constantly do new material. Work on the material that you think is funny and make it consistent. And if you think something's funny but it doesn't work, try to figure out why it doesn't work. Is the premise not funny? Do you need to change the wording around? Do you have to change your pacing or your inflections? Do you have to add facial expressions or be more demonstrative, animated? And start working on getting a tight set. And then once you have a tight set, start building on the time you have. It's not fast. It's not sexy. It's not going to get you to stardom overnight. But when you have like the 15 minutes, make that 20. When you get 20, make it 30. Record yourself. By the time you call an agent or a manager, at least know that you've got 30 solid minutes as a feature. I mean, you're not a headliner. And if you want to be a headliner, even if they're asking for 45 minutes, you better have a solid 60, I think.
I think so too.
And then additionally, have all your stuff together. I mean, as much as I don't like social media, I would be active on social media, have an up-to-date resume, have some decent clips you can send out of your act.
And
some people want to see a 5-minute clip. Some people want to see your entire set. Like, if you can't show a club, a corporate buyer, a manager, an agent, who you are and what you do, I don't think they would have a big incentive to just go ahead and spend a lot of time on hoping that you're a viable act.
yeah, and if I can give one little hint, don't call me and tell me what you hope to do in the future. Yeah, I hope to be the queen of the universe too. And I'm working towards that goal, but nobody's quite buying it yet. And until they do, I'm not going to go out and get a manager for it. Sort of.
Well, the other, and again, Jeremiah, by the way, I'm seeing your comments, Jeremiah, and I'll actually answer at least the question, what got me into the hypnotic acts. But some people are really good at social media, and that is undeniably a component for marketing. And a lot of social media stars will absolutely get booked into clubs, but once you're there, you actually have to be able to perform on stage, because you're going to be able to, if you have a big social media following, chances are you're going to fill seats. But if you don't have like a stage show, people will probably, in most cases, only come out to see you once, because having a funny YouTube clip or having a funny TikTok clip is great, and people will love that and it'll go viral. But if you're going to get booked to do a one-man show or a one-woman show or be a headliner, you still have to fill a bunch of time on stage in front of a live audience.
Yeah. What did that? Remember when you were in Maryland? Didn't you have a YouTube person behind you or something, and they did like 25 minutes? They were coming up to do the later
Oh,
shows.
that was Virginia. Yeah, in Virginia.
Oh, Virginia. Yeah.
Yep. I
And
did a show. I did like 2.5 hours at a club and had a great time. And then they had booked a late show after me, and it was a gal who I think is a TikTok star. And I don't know how well it went. I didn't hear anything that I don't know. I didn't hear much good about it.
yeah,
I don't know.
then they're not delivering the goods, I don't think. So, how did you get into the hypnosis part of?
So when I was a kid, 5, 6, 7 years old, whatever, I wanted to be a comic. I always wanted to be a comic. I never wanted to be anything but a comic. That's what I wanted to do, comedy. In 6th or 7th grade, I wanted to still be a comic, but I had a crush on a girl, and I found a book called How to Pick Up Girls with Hypnosis. And so I read it, and then I tried to ask her out to go to a school dance with me by using my hypnotic charm. And
I'm not saying nothing.
anywho, that failed miserably, but and it was horrible. But I took a real interest in the field, and so I started reading up on hypnosis, every book I could get, and I mean more legitimate ones, as opposed to like books out from the back of like a Playboy magazine or whatever. And I've always been really interested in and pretty good at social sciences, psychology, sociology, communication, blah blah blah, whatever. So when I was in school, a hypnotist came and did a show at my school, and I spoke to him afterwards, and we got to be really friendly. And then I studied hypnosis with him for about 3 years. Initially in college, I studied psychology. That was my major. Eventually switched over from psychology to communication, but had developed a really strong interest in hypnosis from 6th grade on. And in college, I started hypnotizing people privately, like for improved memory and better testing and test scores and concentration and things like that. And then one day, my roommate in college kept bugging me to do hypnosis on stage, and I kept telling him no, that I didn't want to. I wanted to be a comic. And by that point, I was doing open mic nights, and I was doing stand up like every night. And he kept bugging me. And after months of him bugging me, one day I said, if I do hypnosis on stage once, would you leave me alone? And he goes, yeah. So I called up a club and I explained the whole deal. And then I asked if I could do hypnosis on their open mic night. And they reluctantly agreed. And I was last out of 10, 12, 15 comics doing their sets of comedy. And I went on and I did like 30, 40 minutes of hypnosis. And I thought it was going to be a miserable failure, but it actually worked. And it was fun. And it changed the trajectory of my career. It was not part of the plan, though.
Well, and Jeremiah, I can tell you he's equally as good a comic as he is a hypnotist. Because if you wanted to do standalone comedy, you would be a wonderful headliner. There's no doubt in my mind about that.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
But I love the art form that the hypnosis takes. and the way you work everything and the way you do things. I really do love the shows. If I didn't, I wouldn't want to be on the road watching 100 of them. I hope over the next year.
Well, the benefit, I think, by having started on stage as a comic, I've always structured my show with the idea of it being a comedic show, right? So I don't do hypnotic demonstrations. Everything is designed to be more of like a sketch comedy show, like Saturday Night Live sketches or Groundlings or Second City, kind of sketches where the volunteers, unpaid, untrained actors who, through their desire to open up their mind and creativity and allow themselves to experience hypnosis, to be thrown into situations and then create and interact with each other in that moment.
And Jeremiah, if I can tell you, if you are a skeptic, um, you can be a skeptic against hypnosis if you'd like to be. However, I will tell you, I have done some dental surgery that was extensive dental surgery, and I did it with no anesthesia and no Novocaine because I did it purely with hypnosis. Voila, there's the hypnotist right there. Wouldn't even think about having anything done without it because I won't take anesthesia and I am allergic to Novocaine, so I don't have a lot of options available. And the hypnosis worked for me. I literally did not have any pain whatsoever. None. Never took a pain pill. Never took an aspirin. Actually,
Yeah, I think you said your dentist was fairly reluctant at first.
oh, reluctant. Yeah, he was about ready to come out of his skin. He was a lot more nervous than I was. I was fine. I knew I was going to sleep. Go to sleep every night listening to the audio that I listened to. And I was quite comfortable with it all and would do it again. Actually, it's like I told you, if something happens to me, somebody better call you first because they better not be sticking any needles or anything in me because I don't want any of that. I'm very anti anesthesia.
Right.
And
So
as
I
long
can see, uh, Jeremiah, well, I do need a penis enlargement.
I'm not saying anything, Jeremiah.
I once had a guy come up to me after a show. This is a true story. Guy came up to me after a show, and he goes, "Are you the hypnotist?" Which people always ask me that, which I think is funny. I'm only on stage for like 2 hours, and then hey, were you the guy on stage a moment ago? Yeah, the guy with the 5 earrings and the ugly shirt. That's me. Yeah, of course. So he goes, he whispers in my ear. He goes, "Can you make me think my dick's bigger?" Quote. And I backed away because he'd whispered that in my ear, and I looked him right in the eye, and I go, "Yeah, but wouldn't you want your wife to think that?" And he just looked at me, and I'm like, if I were to make you think your dick's bigger, the only one who would think that is you. Like, wouldn't you want other? And then I thought about doing it because that'd be really funny, right? Because I mean, the show is over. I know where else to go. It's like, oh, you're enormous, right? So I could see him walking around the rest of the night with like confidence that clearly he doesn't deserve. And then I ended up not doing it. And I even used to talk about this on stage, but I ended up not doing it because my concern was he was going to get in bed that night, right, with his wife, and just be all full of himself, like, come on, honey, take it, and just have her like really confused, like, what are you even talking about, right? So I ended up not doing that.
Is that possible? Asking for a friend. Jeremiah, you don't have any friends. So,
I've seen hypnotists who have marketed things like hypnosis for breast enlargement and stuff like that, and I don't think there's a lot of validity to it. But if there were, and I don't think there is, but if there were, I think the theory is if you can, through the unconscious mind and the involuntary functions, increase blood flow to an area to nourish it, that it may increase in size. Although I'm highly skeptical. Just saying.
I have a law enforcement degree. I know nothing about anything you're talking about. I'm
Just
just
saying.
we're done. We're done before we get kicked off of YouTube. Thanks, Jeremiah. That's what. Oh, I tell you what, you have got to be sure and introduce yourself to Flip when we come to Lakeland. And we will be coming to Lakeland eventually, I'm afraid. By the way, they're doing a big fundraiser this weekend. A guy named Jay Hewlett's headlining at Winner's Circle. If any of you guys can get out to Winner's Circle, it's a fundraising event for a small child that's got cancer. And they're doing it as a fundraiser. So it'd be great if you guys could show up.
That'd be nice. So we're at about an hour. What do you want to do?
You know, I got to tell you, you have been a real champ to come out and do this tonight because I know that you've been sick all week. And no, you were really sick. You had me worried. And you just started getting up and on your feet today. I think an hour is probably. See, sometimes I start to sound like a babysitter rather than a babysitter. And then there are other times when you've needed a babysitter and I haven't been there. So
that would be every time I leave the house.
Every time you leave the house, yeah.
Jeremiah has a question. Type quickly, my friend.
Use both hands when you're typing. What's with the Marshall in the back? Wait a second. I've got this. It's a Marshall speaker.
Marshall Stack.
A Marshall Stat speaker.
So, quick story, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up. No story that I tell is quick. So when I was in high school, I played guitar in a rock band, and I sucked. I sucked a lot, and our band was actually really pretty good, but I sucked. And so in the day, I loved guitars and I loved amplifiers, and I really like the big amp that a lot of rock and roll bands use were Marshalls, which is I think British, but I won't swear to it. And that's the head, this part, which is the electronics, and then the bottom part of the speakers. And when you have a cabinet with 4 12-inch speakers, and then you have a second one with 4 12-inch speakers, it's called a stack, where you stack one on top of the other. And I always wanted a Marshall Stack. So my band did a show at the Arizona State Fair, a very small stage out of the way, part of the fair. And when we were done, I said to the lead guitar player, I go, I think that's the best we ever sounded. And the lead guitar player goes, well, yeah, we had turned your amp off before we started. And I'd looked back, and they had turned my amp off before we started. So that was my first show, like a big show, and that was my last show. I quit. I was done. But my love of guitars and amps never went away. And so when I started headlining a lot and making better money than I ever expected, this was scratching an itch. And I eventually went out and I bought a Marshall Stack, and it's in my den. I mean, this is something that would be used in a 10,000 seat arena, but it's in my den. And so I usually play a guitar on like volume 1 or 2. 3 if I'm mad at my dog. So my Marshall Stack.
Marshall Stack. Sounds good. All right, we're gonna get out of here so you can go to bed early.
I'm heading to bed shortly. Oh my God.
I You've been up a long time today
Yeah.
compared to what you have been. So we'll let you guys go. We'll let both of you go.
Well, we're going to attempt to do this every Tuesday at 7 o'clock Eastern. Uh, as of now, we'll live stream off of YouTube and then repost on Instagram, Facebook, X. You can find us at Road Comics Adventures on
Yes.
Facebook, Instagram, X, and YouTube.
And
And
you can
then,
find both of us off of there as well.
I've got my own pages, Flip Orley, website fliporley.com. You can
I have
find
my own
Renee.
Facebook page. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Because
So we're going to ask, please share this, subscribe,
yeah,
follow,
hit subscribe or like or something. Do whatever you got to do to this thing.
do that thing you do so well. Help us out.
Yeah. In my defense,
In my defense, we're new at this. Help us out. Be a
help
friend.
help us out, and eventually we're going to be out on the road.
Yeah, we're
You've
going to be
got
coming.
what, 2 trips you're going to do without me, and then and then we get to see how long it takes before you kill me on the road. I think that's what everybody's waiting for. What's funny is all of these people that do watch our video and stuff go, does he realize what he's getting into? What's funny, it's those are my friends.
Yeah.
They don't realize what I'm getting into.
They have no idea.
He's a
They have no
handful.
idea.
He is a handful.
I'm a magnet.
You are a magnet, but I can't wait, and we're gonna have lots of fun on the road, and hopefully you guys will come along with us.
Sounds
So,
good. All right, I'm going to hit the goodbye button. Y'all take care. Thanks for watching.
I can take my shirt off now, right?
There you go.
All right. Later.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye, everybody.
Here it comes.